We grow up hearing a story repeated like a sacred hymn, that anyone, no matter where they come from, can work hard, play by the rules, and achieve happiness, wealth, and success. This is the promise, the mythology, the guiding light we've come to know as the American dream. It's plastered on billboards, slipped into graduation speeches, and hardwired into our idea of what life is supposed to be. But what if I told you this dream isn't truth, it's a carefully constructed story? What if this dream, so tied to motivation and hope, is actually the illusion that keeps millions quietly chasing a life they were never meant to find? Nietzsche would have seen right through it. He spoke often of the danger in blindly following collective truths, moral systems passed down from generation to generation, disguised as virtue but built to control. He called them slave moralities, value systems designed not to empower the individual, but to keep them obedient, small, and locked into cycles of guilt, fear, or aspiration that ultimately serve someone else's ends. The American dream, in this sense, isn't a universal truth. It's a moral myth. A world you gifted to us as if it were reality, when in fact it's a script, written and revised to preserve a certain social and economic order. Think about the core of the dream. It tells you that struggle guarantees success, that if you work hard enough, you will rise. It promises meritocracy while denying the starting line is different for everyone. And more than that, it implies that if you don't make it, if you're poor, if you're stuck, if your dream stays just out of reach, it's your fault. You didn't grind hard enough. You didn't want it enough. You weren't disciplined, committed, or obsessed enough. This is where the darkness begins, because disguised as hope is shame. The dream is dangled like a prize, but it's anchored to guilt. And mass conditioning works better when people blame themselves for their chains, rather than seeing the system wrapped around them. That's not empowerment. That's psychological manipulation, made more effective because it's dressed in positivity. Nietzsche would argue that this kind of morality, not born from truth, but from utility, is the most dangerous kind. It's created not to elevate the human spirit, but to tame it. The foundation of the American dream was never neutral. It evolved within a deeply hierarchical structure built on conquest, labor exploitation, and systemic inequality. But the brilliance of the narrative is its power to convince people that they're not oppressed if they work hard, that they're not exploited if they someday have a chance to become the exploiter. So what happens to a society when billions of people internalize this ideal as personal responsibility? They don't rebel. They don't question the architecture of their suffering. They work longer hours. They pick up side hustles. They numb discomfort with products sold as success cars, watches, social status, designer lives built to look meaningful on the surface. All of it created to keep the dream alive just long enough to avoid existential collapse. And here lies the connection to Machiavelli, who knew better than anyone that control doesn't require chains. It simply requires belief. If a ruler can shape perception, they don't need to rule with fear. They rule through carefully curated desire. The American dream is brilliant in this way. It doesn't force you to serve. It inspires you to volunteer. You pour your time, ambition, and even your identity into the idea that one day you will have made it. And by making you the engine, the dream maintains itself without resistance. But is it really freedom if the finish line never arrives? Is it truly self-determination if every decision you make, from your education to your career to your relationships, is subconsciously driven by a dream you never consciously chose? This isn't to say hard work is bad, or ambition should be abandoned, but those things only have value when they're aligned with truth * your * truth. The problem with the dream is that it doesn't account for who you are. It hands you a life map and says, follow this and you'll be happy. But maybe your joy doesn't live in a six-figure paycheck. Maybe your freedom isn't tied to a mortgage and a 2-car garage. Maybe your soul doesn't come alive in a corner office. And if that's the case, then chasing the dream doesn't make you successful. It makes you invisible to yourself. Nietzsche encouraged us to become who we are, not who society wants, not who our parents dreamt of, not who someone on a stage told us we were supposed to be. And the first step to becoming that person is tearing down the inherited stories we've never thought to question, including the most seductive one of all. That the American dream is a gateway to freedom rather than a beautifully constructed system of emotional, financial, and spiritual control. Because you can't wake up from a dream you still believe is real. What makes the American dream so powerful isn't just the story it tells. It's the way that story disguises control as freedom. On the surface, it appears to be a promise: work hard, stay disciplined, don't cause trouble, and success will eventually find you. But underneath, the dream functions less as a path upward and more as a mechanism of control. An internalized gatekeeper keeping people in line without ever needing bars or chains. Machiavelli would have admired the efficiency of it. He understood that the best kind of power is quiet, invisible, even praised by the people it governs. The ruler who has to rule through brute force may win battles, but not loyalty. A truly strategic leader, he said, understands the art of perception. Public control is best maintained not through fear, but through carefully constructed belief. The American dream, then, is not just an ideal. It's one of the most effective psychological tools of governance ever created. Because only in a system this clever can people feel free while being tightly bound. Only in a system this precise can millions blame themselves for their failure, while the structure that sets them up to fail stays unquestioned. This is Machiavellian brilliance, not in the cruelty of violence, but in the elegance of manipulation. Inspire people to tie their identity and self-worth to success, and they will regulate themselves far better than any dictator ever could. Think about it. You're raised in a society that tells you from the start that you are responsible for your future. That's not inherently wrong, but then it adds a twist, that if you don't succeed in very defined terms, money, status, property, image, it's because you didn't work hard enough. There's no mention of systems that shape the playing field, no consideration of bias or access or inherited disadvantage. Just the idea that effort equals outcome, and if the outcome isn't there, well, look inward, try harder. Work longer, hustle more, buy another course, wake up at 5 a.m. This is how control hides in plain sight. It tells you that the cage is your fault. Now imagine this applied to an entire culture. Millions of people running faster and faster on a treadmill going nowhere, blaming themselves for not arriving. That is what happens when freedom is rewritten as performance. When people internalize the idea that their worth is measured in output, they become more compliant, easier to direct, less likely to rebel. Who has time to question power when you're too busy proving yourself? Who stops to think critically about the system when your entire sense of value depends on succeeding within it? Machiavelli knew that the most stable form of rule is not the loud, obvious kind. It's the rule that creates the illusion of autonomy. Let people believe they're in control, and they'll become the architects of their own limitation. The American dream works precisely because it makes you feel like the author of your life story. Even when every chapter is being shaped by external pressure, institutional design, and cultural force, what's more, The dream doesn't just control through aspiration, it controls through asterisk fear. Asterisk, if you don't follow the script, the consequences are not just material, they're social and emotional. Drop out of the system and you risk judgment, alienation, irrelevance, even self-doubt. You risk feeling like you're asterisk less than asterisk, not just because you lack money, but because you've deviated from the accepted definition of a worthy life. So, most people stay in the game. Not because it's working, but because leaving feels like disappearing. That's the trap. That's the contradiction no one wants to name out loud. The very dream we are taught to live for is often what keeps us trapped. We become so concerned with reaching the next level, checking the next box, chasing the next milestone, that we never stop to ask a deeper question. Asterisk, do I even want this version of success? Or was I simply told I should want it? Asterisk, that's not freedom. That's a life outsourced to a narrative you never even wrote. This is where Nietzsche's voice echoes loudest, urging us to take off the masks, to peel away the cultural conditioning, to stop conforming simply for comfort or belonging. If Machiavelli teaches us how power works, Nietzsche demands that we wake up to it. He warns against living by inherited values, by borrowed dreams, by other people's definitions of meaning. He reminds us that just because a story has been repeated 1,000 times doesn't make it true. And the American dream, told in classrooms and commercials, in family dinners and graduation speeches, is one of the most repeated stories in modern history. But repetition creates belief, and belief, when left unexamined, creates control. The most dangerous prisons are the ones you can't see, because they're built inside the mind. There's a quiet script that runs underneath the surface of modern life, and whether we realize it or not, most of us are following it. It says, be productive, be successful, be somebody, and the measure of that somebody is almost always tied to what you earn, what you own, and what other people think of you. This is the moral framework of the American dream, not just an economic idea, but a deeply embedded value system that equates worth with achievement. And in that system, failure isn't treated as part of growth. It's seen as a kind of moral shortcoming, a flaw in character, a personal defect. To Nietzsche, this would be the ultimate expression of what he called slave morality. It's a form of cultural programming where people accept external definitions of good and bad, right and wrong, success and failure, without ever questioning the source. In the context of the American dream, this means living a life where you judge yourself and are judged by others, not for the content of your character or the depth of your inner life, but by your alignment with a narrow, standardized concept of success. It's not how wise you are, not how kind, not how alive or whole or free. It's how much money you make, how prestigious your job sounds, how curated your life appears from the outside. And this version of morality, Nietzsche would argue, is not based on human truth. It's based on herd thinking. It protects the system, not the self, because when success is moralized, so is failure. You didn't just lose your job, you became a loser. You didn't just go broke, you became worthless. This dynamic creates a population that constantly performs, striving to achieve not just financial goals, but an identity that earns them approval, safety, and belonging. It is deeply exhausting, and it is everywhere. Social media inflames it. Every scroll tells you what life should look like, what excellence should feel like, what your timeline should be. And when your reality doesn't match the curated perfection you're fed daily, you internalize that disconnect as shame. You don't see a rigged system, you see a broken self. What you don't realize is that the rules were designed in a way that ensures most people will never feel like they've truly made it. Machiavelli understood the power of this kind of manipulation in The Prince. He famously wrote that to maintain control, A ruler must not only shape policies but also perceptions. Make people believe they are in the presence of opportunity, even if none exists. The American dream does exactly that. It holds up the image of success like a trophy everyone could win, while quietly ensuring that the game is rigged from the start. The few who reach it serve as proof the system works, even if they're exceptions, not examples. This illusion keeps people running in loops. It turns life into performance. You work to earn, but more importantly, you work to matter. And over time, the means become the end. The job becomes your identity, your GPA becomes your sense of self, your business card becomes your resume and your mirror. You're no longer building a life, you're building a brand. And if you don't keep up appearances, you fear everything you've built will collapse, not just materially, but existentially. Because when your worth is optimized for visibility and validation, it never feels safe. It always feels at risk. In this world, burnout isn't a bug, it's the feature. Anxiety isn't a sign something's wrong. It's the fuel that keeps people grinding. You wake up tired, but you keep hustling. You feel disconnected, but you keep posting. You doubt yourself, but you keep pretending confidence. Because to step off this cultural treadmill, to admit you're tired, confused, or disillusioned, is to risk becoming invisible. And invisibility is equated with irrelevance, and irrelevance in this system feels like spiritual death. So the cycle continues. You fear failure not just because it threatens your finances, but because it threatens your identity. And because failure is moralized, you begin to moralize your effort. If you're struggling, you must not be trying hard enough. If you're dissatisfied, you must be ungrateful. The ambition that once inspired you now becomes the weapon you turn against yourself. And the dream, the one you were promised, becomes a doctrine you quietly suffer under, too afraid to reject it, too ashamed to admit that it's making you feel small. Nietzsche dared to ask, what if our definition of virtue is wrong? What if the values we're upholding are not signs of strength, but symptoms of deep distortion? What if your exhaustion isn't a weakness, but a signal that the game you're playing was never designed for your liberation? These are dangerous questions, but they are necessary. Because until you ask them, you'll keep confusing performance with purpose. You'll keep calling the chase a calling, and you'll keep measuring your worth with yardsticks that were never meant to reflect your soul. We are not failing the dream, it's the dream that's failing us. At some point, if you've been paying attention, not just to the world, but to your own inner life, something cracks. It's subtle at first. Maybe it's a quiet unrest, a sense that the job, the house, the upward climb isn't making you feel how you thought it would. Maybe it's the realization that no amount of likes, status, or wealth ever really eases that persistent feeling of disconnection. Or maybe it's a deeper shift, a moment when your body, your mind, or your spirit simply refuses to keep participating in something that no longer feels real. It's in that moment, when the illusion starts to fade, that you're faced with a difficult choice. Do you keep playing the game, hoping that one more achievement will finally make it feel worthwhile? Or do you step back, examine the blueprint you've been handed, and start asking the questions that most people spend their whole lives avoiding? That's where the journey of liberation begins, not with fleeing the system, but with seeing it for what it truly is. For Nietzsche, liberation has nothing to do with comfort. It's not about finding a better version of the old story. It's about burning the story down. He believed that to be truly free, one must first confront the false identities and inherited beliefs that have quietly shaped their entire existence, especially the ones that come with praise, especially the ones that look like success on the outside. Because when a society teaches you that to be desirable, you must be productive, and to be respected, you must be constantly proving your value, it becomes nearly impossible to discover who you are. When you're not performing, the American dream doesn't just sell success. It teaches you what success is supposed to look like. It tells you what to want, what to chase, what to shame, and when to smile. And because it's presented as freedom, most never realize they've been shaped by it until their soul starts to shrink in its shadow. There's no rebellion quite like the act of slowing down in a world designed to keep you hurrying. There's no greater resistance than choosing presence over productivity, wholeness over hustle, and truth over image. But it takes more than rejection to be free. It takes recreation. You can't just abandon the dream. You have to build something in its place, something real, something rooted in your values, not the values society sold you. Nietzsche's idea was that we must become the authors of our own morality, not morality in the narrow religious sense, but in the deeper existential one: who you are when no one's watching, what you stand for when no one's clapping, how you define success when every external measure has been stripped away. For many, that kind of ownership feels terrifying. There's no rule book for becoming yourself. There's no applause for opting out of the game. But there is power in this emptiness because it's honest. And honesty, no matter how uncomfortable, is the soil where real liberation grows. Machiavelli, in all his strategy and realism, understood one timeless truth: people will choose safety over freedom when freedom feels uncertain. That's why systems like the American dream work so well. They offer structure, direction, a story, even if it's a story stacked against you. And that's where the dream becomes a cage, beautiful on the outside, ruinous on the inside, because the unknowable nature of true freedom feels more threatening than the predictability of a rigged system. Most people don't stay stuck because they don't desire more. They stay stuck because they've never been taught how to trust themselves outside the systems that raised them. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. Once you realize the ladder you've been climbing is leaning against the wrong wall, you stop climbing simply for the sake of reaching. You begin to descend, slowly, carefully, thoughtfully. And when your feet touch the ground again, maybe for the first time in years, you have to ask, if I'm no longer here to earn my worth, what am I here for? It's a question most people never ask because it requires peeling back everything. Your career labels, your financial goals, your social identity. It requires sitting in the nakedness of not knowing. But from that discomfort comes clarity. Not the kind handed to you by culture, but the kind born from inside you. That internal compass, that quiet truth, that rare, irreversible realization that your life doesn't have to be about becoming important in someone else's world. It can be about becoming real in your own. And that's the most radical act of all, not escape, but awakening. Not rebellion for rebellion's sake, but the willingness to redefine what it means to be alive on your own terms. It won't earn you immediate applause. It won't guarantee the approval of those still chasing the illusion. But it will give you something they can't. The peace that comes from no longer betraying yourself just to belong. Because real freedom isn't something they'll give you if you're good enough. It's something you claim when you finally remember who you were before the dream told you who to be.